Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny.
Are you okay?
Yeah, just all kinds of technical problems. It's always, when you're always trying to get something, when you need something done at a certain time, that's always right when something happens.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
So,
Well, it's good to see you this morning, and we've got quite a few people watching. I mean, our guests must be pretty exciting this morning. We have all kinds of people starting off watching. So good morning, everybody. And don't forget, if you guys have questions for Robert this morning and you want to do that, I've got my Rumble page up so you can message in and I'll just say, good morning. So you can message in there if you'd like to. You can message on Facebook. Anything, if you've got questions, just shoot us a question. We'll be happy to talk to you about it. Michael, I'm going to introduce Mr. Bortins because he's awesome. And I'm so glad he consented to come on this morning. He is the CEO of Classical Conversations, and Classical Conversations, he can tell you more about it in a minute. But it's really it's a homeschooling program, but it's an amazing homeschooling program. And again, I'll let him kind of go into it. Robert is another person that I met during the Common Core fight, because a lot of us who were homeschooling our own kids, we didn't want Common Core for public education. And it wasn't just, I mean, I think that's a thing that I really want to make sure that I get across right now. Homeschooling people, so many of us are not so inclusive that we live in a bubble and we don't care what happens to society in general. I mean, many of us are very engaged in the culture and are concerned about the culture. And, Robert's the same way. And there were so many people who were in the Common Core fight with us who had they may have been involved in homeschooling, but we're concerned about what's going to happen moving forward and how culture works and all of those kinds of things. So I met Robert many years ago and have just been really impressed with the growth of Classical Conversations and then kind of what he does and the way he speaks out. And I was just telling him that a minute ago. And I'm going to sneeze. So I'm going to let him come on and I'm going to shut off my microphone.
Hi, Jenny.
Good morning, Robert. How are you before I have to shut off my microphone and sneeze?
Go for it. I'm doing well.
I know.
I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. And this is Michael, by the way. This is Michael Grande. He faces our parents. He's like a parent-facing guy, and he does open records requests for schools when they're not paying attention to people and to students and parents. And so that's what Michael does.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Michael.
Yes,
Appreciate all you're doing. We need to keep our government open and honest.
Yeah, 100%.
Jenny, think you mentioned why homeschoolers are willing to engage in the culture, and it's probably because we teach our children history. And you've probably heard the saying that those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. But that's only half of the saying. The second half of the saying is those who do learn history are doomed to watch everyone else repeat it.
Well,
So,
there's quite a bit of truth to that. I mean,
and
kind of in a sad way, yeah.
yeah, so I think that's always been why I've been able to engage in the cultures, because I know that homeschoolers, my children and myself, have to live in the culture
Right.
around us. And if we, I don't think Christians have been called to have a holy huddle and let the world burn around us as we hide, but rather to go and evangelize and tell people about the flourishing life that you can live by acknowledging Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And so it's
Amen.
important to engage the culture, and the more that we can align how the world works, and we can learn about that through the Bible. So biblical truths, if we can align our laws with biblical truth, then it's going to create a more flourishing life for all of us. And when those two things are divorced from each other, we see this high depression, drug use, just all these mental issues. So our culture, our Christian heritage has been lost, and that has caused a lot of issues over the last 20 years in the United States. And so it's important for us to know the truth, to let other people know all about him.
Absolutely. So I want you to start off by telling me a little bit about Classical Conversations, because I want people to know what it is. And disclaimer, I guess you can say, I don't know if it's a disclaimer or an ad. But our family used Classical Conversations and we absolutely loved it. I was telling Robert this morning before we came on, my 18-year-old, who's the youngest one, who did, there's a section in the younger age group where they learned John 1 in Latin. And he came into my office the other day and started reciting John 1 in Latin because he remembered it. So it was, we all look back on the time that we spent in that curriculum with just a great amount of fondness. And I do actually tell people, and I'd kind of like you to build on this. I do actually tell people that if you're going to start off homeschooling, because we actually did not do the higher end classical because we started our own co-op, and I was teaching at the co-op and we did that. But starting off, I just don't know that there's a better way to get into homeschooling than starting through classical because of the way it's structured. It taught me how to teach my kids, and I actually was a teacher. I mean, that was my job. I was a public school teacher, and it taught me how to teach my kids. And it was so engaging for my kids that, like I said, they still remember things today. So just give us the kind of 411 on Classical Conversations.
Yeah, so Classical Conversations is a holistic homeschool program. We have starting kindergarten and now through college credit. Parents can even earn their master's degrees in classical studies through a program where you're taking, it's really in line with our high school program, where you can basically study alongside your kid, turn your papers into a professor at Southeastern University in our partnership through there, and get a master's degree.
That's awesome.
Yes. So the difference between Classical Conversations and other homeschooling programs is we believe in empowering parents. And our program is designed at helping parents become the best teachers that they can be. And that we believe that when we empower parents, that they will homeschool their kids extremely well. And so we do that using the classical model. We do that by creating local communities that meet once a week with a trained tutor parent. And part of the 3 steps of classical education, there's grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, which is part of that conversation. And we know that as students get older and they're homeschooling, they need to have robust conversation, not with just their parents, but with their peers. And so we take the timeless, great books and read through that with, we've been around for 26 years. So the people who write our curriculum are homeschool moms. So we've got thousands of years of homeschool experience being poured into our curriculum. Unlike, some of our competitors who get professional writers who've never homeschooled their kids, might not even have kids writing their curriculum. And, we just love parents. And so that's what we're focused on, because we believe that God gave children to parents, not the government, not the local school board. And so, we see that when parents are involved in their kids' education, there's better outcomes. And we know that parents can't get involved any more than homeschooling intentionally. And so we want to give them the tools. And like you mentioned earlier, you're a teacher. My wife was a school teacher for 10 years in middle school. And when I,
Me too.
we started talking about getting married when we were dating. And I said, I always I was homeschooled. I want to homeschool my kids. And she started laughing, and she said, I would never send my kids to these government schools. I didn't even know what homeschooling was. And, now that she's educating our 3 young kids, she said, they didn't teach me anything in the 4 years of college school. Like, I've had to unlearn all of my teaching because they never taught me how to pass on knowledge to the next generation. All they did is teach me how to manage our classrooms. And so they really, I know, teachers have a incredibly hard job. I think there was a documentary called Waiting on Superman or something like that a few years ago, because the system just isn't set up for teachers. It's definitely not set up for the students. And that's why we have like 40% of kids are bullied, 30% are sexually harassed, and about 25% can read at grade level. And that's the outcome of a socialist Marxist system. A lot of people, I think, as we'll probably talk about school choice a little bit later on, but for me, Marxism said the redistribution of wealth. And so our public school systems are founded on Marxist principles of redistribution of wealth. And so when you take public money and put it into private institutions, you're not getting kids out of public schools. You're just creating public schools out of every single private institution. And, over the last, 100 years, we've seen how well that works out. But
let me back up, because
Go ahead.
No, I loved it, but I'm going to jump on that one later. But I do want you to back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
So where did classical conversations come from? Because that's the story I absolutely love. And to me, those people who say, I can't do this, or I they have the can't kind of, built into their vocabulary. I mean, it's true. Your mother is no slouch. She is highly educated, but still in all, I mean, talk about what happened there.
Yeah, so my parents met at the University of Michigan and got married and had me. And my mom was considered highly educated by all those around her, but she realized that she didn't really have any education at all, that she had been lied to by the system. And she discovered that because my dad is about 9 years older than her, and his educational upbringing was completely different than hers. So she didn't know what she was looking for. She just knew that she wasn't going to put her kids in government school systems. And this was back in 1983, 84, and homeschooling was not even legal in every single state. It wasn't until the mid-90s homeschooling was officially legal. But of course, you could still keep your kids at home till, 5, 6, 7 years old. And so she spent a year as an aerospace engineer for Boeing. She was not a Christian, and she decided to stay home after that with myself. And she was pregnant with my second brother, or my first brother, I guess. The second of the four. There's 4 brothers.
Oh, wow.
And so she started homeschooling, or finding out what homeschooling was, was one of the pioneers fighting for rights. We moved to North Carolina. She was saved just through the homeschooling movement and the people that she met early on, because
Wow.
there was mostly, the hippies started homeschooling in like the 60s and 70s, but then it was mostly Christians in the 80s and 90s. And we were involved in different co-ops and different activities. And just like any parent back then, there wasn't a whole lot of, homeschool specific curriculum, not like there is
Yeah.
now. And, pulling stuff from the library and getting old books and just trying to figure it out, day by day, year by year. And then when I was in middle school, she discovered, classical education. And that really realized that was the thing that was missing. That was her missing puzzle piece. And
Interesting.
if you homeschool, you kind of naturally are doing a lot of the classical education model, just because, that's kind of how God created us. But if you've never heard of classical education, you wouldn't know that. But it's the things that work for kids as they mature,
It is. You're right.
and the things that they naturally do. So she decided, after looking at some private schools in the area, that those things wouldn't really provide the education that she wanted. And so she said, well, what if I tried to create a homeschool group doing classical education in high school? And she saw that co-ops, had things that were really good with it. But one of the things she saw was if you didn't charge, people would flake and they may or may not show up, and that really distributed the model. So she said, well, I'm going to charge a little bit of money so that people show up and they, are motivated to do the work. They've got skin in the game. And so we started with myself and 10 other students, so 11 of us in 1997 in our basement in Winston-Salem. At that point, we had about a guide, found our Challenge 1 guide, is what we would refer to it as now. It was about 11 pages stapled together that she wrote, a couple weeks ahead of when we did the assignments. And
I'm just laughing because I know what the curriculum is now. So it's just funny, to think about it back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So it went so well. Every family wanted to do it again. They wanted to have it for their younger siblings, and other people were hearing about it. So she just gave her 11 pages that she created to another homeschool mom who started a group in her home. And we went through it again, the next level. And so I did Challenge 1, 2, and 3 before going off to university and getting an industrial engineering degree. Kept on growing. And then my sophomore year, I got the phone call that my dad had quit his job, that they were going to try to make Classical Conversations a real organization, and that I had to pay for the rest of college myself, and they were not going to be helping me out anymore. And so I was out of state, but tuition was a little bit different.
We're done with you, buddy. We're moving on.
Basically, well, she started it off by saying, we're thinking about buying you a car, but instead your dad quit his job. Luckily, I was homeschooled, and I had the tools of learning, and I was able to figure it out. I went to the co-op office, so I would work a semester, go to school a semester, work a semester, go to school. We went from maybe a couple hundred students, about 300 students when I got that phone call from my mom, to about 3,000 students by the time I had graduated. And at that point, I went on to become an industrial engineer, worked in manufacturing, kind of went through the corporate ladder, just kept on getting raises and promotions. And, people ask me, did you always know you were going to work for Classical Conversations? And I said, no, Classical Conversations wasn't a thing. I mean, it wasn't. My parents would call me, a college student, and see if they could borrow money to buy books for their book fairs. And I'd say, Mom, this isn't how it works. I'm supposed to call you for money.
Great.
So they bootstrapped it from their savings. They didn't get outside funding or anything like that. And a lot of lean years. But as I kind of proved to myself that homeschooling worked, I really enjoyed it. I loved the freedom it gave me. I loved the education that I was able to receive. But when I kind of was able to prove to myself it works in the real world, and you can go to college and graduate and get a job, that that you're not any more messed up than anyone else. that the opportunity came for me to kind of come into classical conversations and start to help run the family business and then take over as CEO because my mom, there's four of us, but there's a big gap between myself and John, and then there's a 12-year gap, and then there's my
wow.
two youngest brothers, William and
Wow.
David. So our family joke is my parents saw how they screwed the first two up and figured they better start again with two new ones. The other thing is, though, that it's really important to understand how classical conversations was started and how it became a full K through 12 curriculum. We started in high school. So we started with the, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. And then we went back when my two youngest brothers were getting into elementary school. My mom did look at what were these challenge students, these 11 that I went through with, what were they missing? What do I wish they had? What would have really completed and rounded out their education? And so that's how our foundations and essentials program, which is our K through 6 and 3rd through 6th grade, that's how they were founded, is how do we help these kids rise to the challenge of our middle school and high school program? And so many churches will start a kindergarten and then do a 1st grade and then a 2nd grade and then eventually get to 12th grade. But 12 years ago, when they started their kindergarten program, they didn't think, what does a 12th grader need to look like? How do we get there? What's the path? And of
Right.
course,
No,
they've
exactly.
what they create is infinitely better than what the government system creates, but they didn't start with the end in mind. And so kind of growing up, we had a game called the Oregon Trail, and you would hire a guide. And so a lot of times these other institutions that we compete against, they're going on their Oregon Trail for the first time versus classical conversations. We've been to Oregon. We start back at the East Coast, and we're a guide that, knows which rivers to, cross, where the hunting grounds are, how to help parents take their, 5-year-old to becoming an adult who loves the Lord, loves to learn, and will be able to conquer any challenge that the world puts in front of them.
Well, I want to say one thing really quickly about, I think this was my favorite part of the program, although I'm not sure I had so many favorites, but this I think was my favorite one because I just loved it so much. The thing about classical are as in the younger grades, so these are in the very young grades, you sing your lessons essentially. So you have a set of songs and the kids learn the songs, but the words are actually their lessons. And so you'll have to help me because it's been a while. I mean, like I said, my youngest is 18. What is the song about all of the gosh,
Well, we do
the seven wonders of the world.
yes.
That's what it was. There was a
Yes.
song about the seven wonders of the world, and I think Sam sang that one the other day, part of it. Just because for years, I mean, when you really look at education and you go back and see what works, anything set to music is, I mean, it's the best trick ever. All you have to do is teach the kids the music. And then once they know the lyrics, the music and the lyrics combine, and then they're just singing this stuff. And we would have the CD in the car and we would go someplace and everybody would be singing all the songs. And it was such a fun thing to do as a family. I mean, and again, we have such fond memories of those kinds of things, just being able to sit in the car and sing, sing our foundation songs, and it was just great. And I think people that isn't, I mean, it's not, that particular thing isn't like front and center on your website. And I just had to stick that in there because for us, I think that was some of the best memories we had was learning those songs and singing them again. And, even the kids, when they get older, bringing them back up. So we loved that. It was awesome.
Yeah. So, classical education starts with the grammar stage and rote memorization, and you hear in modern education, oh, it's so boring. It's like, well, you can make it boring. You can make anything boring, but we like to make it fun and exciting. And like you said, singing. I'm not a trained singer, and we want to keep your audience tuned in, so I won't try to sing any of our songs. But you can. Your kids are going to, memorize things through song naturally. Like if they're watching their favorite cartoon, it has an opening, right? They're going to learn those words and they're going to enjoy it. So why not have them memorize great things, things that are going to help them throughout their lives? Like you said, your 18-year-olds singing them still. We hear from students now in college, they'll have a professor say something, and 2 or 3 kids in their class who are from different states, different backgrounds, start, humming or singing, and they're like, hey, were you in CC? And it's a great way of, children to find other people who had an education that was just like them. And it's amazing to see how much they know. I was an industrial engineer, and chemistry 101 and 102 for engineers at Clemson University. I think our 5th graders could pass because of the songs that
Really?
they've memorized.
How
And most of
funny.
those tests, at least the first 2 tests, were all just the periodic table.
Yeah.
And our students memorized the periodic table. And I mean, you're like, these are 200 people in a lecture hall, and with the curve, if you got about half of them right, you could probably get an A.
Yep.
So it's quite remarkable, the education you can give your children. And like you said, a lot of parents say that, well, I can't do it. I don't know how. I'm not a teacher. And it's really, really not difficult because the Lord designed parents to educate their children.
I believe that.
Everyone homeschools. If you send your kids to private school, you are home educating in some ways, because you're telling them that education to you is important, and you're going to sacrifice financially to send them to it. And so you're kind of saying, education is important. If you send your kids to government schools, you're homeschooling them in a way that's saying, hey, these experts know more than I do. The government is going to take care of you, and we need to rely on them for these things. So I'm painting with broad brushes, but every person, if you teach your kids to tie their shoes, if you teach them manners, these are all forms of homeschooling. It's when we get into that very specific educational aspects of, curriculum that parents get freaked out. But it's the same methods, and that's why we really talk about the tools of learning at Classical Conversations, and empowering parents with those tools of learning, because once you have the right tools in your tool belt, whatever subjects or ideas you come across, you can figure out how to address those and do it with confidence and skill.
Well, I'm going to navigate to the website, and I'm actually going to pull it up here because I want you to show people something. So give me just 1 second. Here we go.
Yep.
All right. So on the screen here is your website, and I'm going to see if I can't make it a little bit bigger. Whoops! And then it went away. Hang on. Oh, it's on my wrong page. There we go. Okay, this is what I wanted. All right. So, what is the best way? So here's your page. It's classicalconversations.com. What is the best way for people to find a community? Because you realize that it is a community. I mean, you usually it's churches that host the community, and you go one time a week, and then you'll usually, that community will have some other kinds of things, so that you're like we used to do field trips, once a month field trips, and there are other things that you can do, but it's usually through private school. Through a church. Where do people go on this website where it says start here?
Yeah, so Start Here is a great place to go. I think there's also Find a Community.
There it
Both of
is.
those are places you can go. So we have over 2,000 communities in the United States. We have about 700 communities internationally in 57 different countries. If there's not a local community, we're happy to help you get one started. We've got all the processes in place to help families start a community or join one. And, the Bible is real clear that we need each other, that, individuals, neighbors are responsible for helping individual neighbors, and that as a church body, we're responsible for each other. And homeschooling is hard. I don't think it is easy, but doing hard things is worth it.
It is.
Doing easy things anyone can do. Doing hard things makes us all stronger. And but when you do hard things, you need people to lift you up sometimes and help out. So we believe that community model is very powerful for families. And we hear all the time. I just had a local friend get hurt and have to have surgery, and they're in classical conversations. And he told me that their local community they haven't had to cook a meal in 21 days
Oh, wow.
because everyone
Awesome.
has brought them. And that's we hear those type of stories all the time from people where they have something in life go wrong or right, and we're able to either lift someone else up or be lifted up. So it also, we always laugh when we hear, what about socialization? And I don't think we hear that quite as much anymore like we did maybe 10 years ago. But obviously, the community model nips that one in the bud, even though it's not a true issue with homeschoolers generally. So yeah, it's just so much fun to be able to get together with people who are on that same path. And some people worry about independence as far as, hey, I want to do this or that. But the other thing with classical conversations is for that K through 6, that younger age group, it's only 24 weeks. In most states, you're supposed to do school for 36 weeks. So you've got another 12 weeks where you can go pursue specific interests to your family. And even with our challenge program, that's 30 weeks, which still gives you another 6 weeks to pursue other interests if you want to. And of course, homeschoolers, we really embrace education 24/7, 365. So it's just a short period of time of working together with others, doing hard things with support. And we even have plenty of breaks built in for you and your family to go see whatever else is interest to you.
Well, I do want to say, I'm sorry, go ahead,
Well,
Michael.
I just want to reiterate on top of something Robert just said. Homeschool's always had like a stigma of this or that in people's minds. And I think we need to kind of break that paradigm or have Robert kind of expand on it even farther, especially with the socialization aspect, where I think now you've got kids in today's time with devices, the way school is and how disempowering it is. You've got the most socially awkward kids coming out of public school that have ever been on this planet, probably at any time.
Yeah.
And just to
Exactly.
kind of break that paradigm of homeschoolers they're not socially adapt. And I mean it's just absolutely completely wrong. And on top of that, you have the performance issues of public school versus homeschool. I mean, it's not even close. So if Robert could just kind of expand on that just even a little bit more as far as the performance goes. I mean, because we know just how bad, Jenni and I talk constantly, just how bad the reading proficiencies are, the math proficiencies. We've had people on that have broken down every single school in the state of Oklahoma and how bad it is. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But I think, it's that responsibility factor from the parents to actually, it's time that we take responsibility for that education. And this is by far the absolute best way to do that.
Well, I did want to mention something on that same wavelength. So part of the reason why we started classical conversations in the first place, my oldest son was bullied something horrible in 2nd grade. And I mean, his teacher was even bullying him. So it just became I mean, he just would come home and cry and go, please homeschool me, please. And I'm like, I don't know how to, what are you, I don't know what you're talking about. Homeschooling. What is this thing? I mean, I had no clue. And so if it hadn't have been that God had put a person in Rope at the time, who was actually a tutor for classical conversations.
Mm.
And we were talking about this, and I was like, Dan, I have no idea what to do. He's coming in, I'm crying. He says he wants to be homeschooled. I don't know, how am I going to do that? And Rope at the same time. And I mean, so she got me into classical conversations. And it was so interesting to me that this kid, who was your typical, he's a brainiac. And, that tends to be kind of the kids who are bullied in school anyway, or the brainiacs. He was a brainiac. We got him into classical conversations. He started in 3rd grade, basically, and we got him into a community, and I watched that kid become an entirely different person. I mean, he went from being kind of a, everything was sad, and he was confident. He could recite his things. He could sing his songs. He had these friends that he had now, and all of the friends knew the same things, and they were doing the same things. And it was, I mean, for people who say that there's no socialization or anything like that, it's simply ridiculous. He had no socialization in public school, frankly, because he was just bullied. And once he finally got into classical conversations and he was with kids who were doing the same thing that he was, I saw an entirely different kid, and he just blossomed. I mean, and that kid today is, he has, oh my gosh, I don't know, probably $20,000 worth of synthesizers and things in his room. And he makes electronic music, as well as finishing up his degree in programming at a local university. So, and that's where he came from. That's where that kid came from. So you will always have a place in my heart, Robert Bortins, you in classical.
Well, when's he graduating? Because we might need some more IT people this spring.
Oh, hey, I might let him know. He's actually graduating in May.
Okay.
I'll let him know.
Right. Yeah, tell him to check us out.
He could go back home.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think
so.
Yeah,
talk a little bit, like Michael asked. Talk a little bit about performance of homeschool kids.
Yeah, well, so first I want to address a little bit more of that social aspect. So we socialize animals, and we want to civilize human beings.
Yeah.
And if you think about the Darwinian worldview, that we are all just slightly more than animals, it's no surprise that we ask questions related to their behavior, versus creationist or biblical worldview that we are all slightly less than angels and created in the image of God, that we should help our young people become adults that are worthy to call themselves sons and daughters of the Most High. So we take it from a completely different perspective, and we do the same thing with our education. And so sometimes our kids don't necessarily score as high, especially at the younger ages on some of these standardized tests, sometimes, because we're trying to create young adults who are going to really embrace and benefit their community. And so we don't spend a lot of time preparing for standardized tests, because that is a waste of students' precious time. But if you look at it globally, homeschoolers typically score 20 to 30% higher than government schools do on end-of-grade testing. They score similar to high-priced private schools. So you're able to give your kids a similar education, I would argue a better education than maybe the private school down the road that's charging $30,000, $40,000 a year for their education. And more importantly, you're creating students that adults want to talk to. It's always, you kind of hear
It's true.
those stories, like you said, hey, how are you gonna socialize with other people? And like the homeschool kids, like, well, I'm talking to you right now. And you hear that from you hear it a lot now, especially in churches. And hey, I know which kids are homeschooled because they're the ones that are engaging, ask good questions. You hear that from college professors now that
Yeah.
we have college partners that basically, if you go to classical conversations in high school, they'll give you scholarships just by having classical conversations on your transcript. We've got
Nice.
professors that say, tell their admin to go recruit more CC students because they're the best ones in their class. And it's not that we've really done anything other than follow the natural way of learning and showed parents how they can do that in their homeschool and do that in community. So it's
Well,
pretty humbling.
let's just talk a second about what the natural, because you said it, the natural thing. Well, so the natural question is, but Dad, why? I mean, that's the natural model of learning, right? And another thing that I loved so much about classical, especially when you got up into the challenge courses, it's more of a Socratic method. You learn, but then you're talking about things, you're asking questions. That's the thing. That's what builds critical thinking. That is
Yes.
not you just having somebody sit there and go, and you need to memorize blah, 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 blah. And that's the way it is. That's not critical thinking. That's you sitting and learning how to memorize something. Critical thinking is when you have to explain your position to somebody else, or then when somebody else asks you a question and you give your perspective and they don't like that and they have another one, it's you being able to talk that out. That's critical thinking. That's how you build your worldview. That's how you assimilate the things that are outside onto your hard drive. And that is the absolutely premier, most awesome part of homeschooling in general, but in classical, the way you guys have that whole program set up, it's just, I mean, bar none for that. And I do believe that that is why people want to have classical conversation students go to their university or even hire them, because they have those critical thinking skills. I've seen it in my own kids, just from being in the program. And because I see other kids and how they interact with other kids. And a lot of the times you get, my kids will start on a conversation. You see the other kids with the deer in the headlights look. It's
Mhm.
like, I do not know how to assimilate this question, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they've been taught to only answer the right, if you don't know the right answer, to keep your mouth shut. And yeah, so the natural way of learning really is how you learn anything, even as adult. If you want to learn something brand new, first you have to learn the grammar of the subject. So if you want to, you know, learn to change your oil for yourself the first time, right? You've got to learn like what type of oils are there. Where's the dipstick?
Exactly.
Where's the oil filter? Where's the oil pan? So those you will need to learn the grammar of those words so that you have a basic understanding. And then, like you said, then there's the why, which is what we call the dialectic. And it's like, okay, I've got all this information, but why are we doing this? And how do these things tie together? And why is it important? And so that's really what you're kind of learning in the middle school years and early high schools when we see children develop those type of questions. Of course, like my 4-year-old asks me why all the time, but it's a different a different type of why. And then finally, the rhetorical stage is the final stage, and it's where you can explain to others your position. You can teach someone else how to change their oil on their car. You can go perform that yourself with ease because you've done it so many times. And really, you got to get to the rhetorical stage to love anything. I mean, think about something that you love as an adult now that maybe you didn't like when you were younger. And but once you kind of started understanding, having more information about that subject, you started loving it more and more. And so our mission at Classical Conversations is to know God and to make him known. And of course, we know him through the word that he's given us, but we also know him through the world that he's given us. And how do we study the world? Well, we study through science, chemistry, biology, math, English, history, All of these different subjects that you would recognize in school are just ways of learning more about the world the Lord's given us so we can love him and serve him more effectively, and just create flourishing cultures and communities for not just the Christians around us, but for the
Right.
pagans around us as well.
The pagans. Okay, you have to get off at 55, so I want to bring this in before we forget about it.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen again, and then let's talk about educational independence.
Yes. Yeah. So, of course, like you all, we are very weary of government dollars being put into private institutions, and we've seen that not work throughout history. I always started challenging people who support this. Name one field where the government has subsidized it and the quality's gone up and the price has gone down. I can name 1,000 that's done the opposite. I'm just asking you to name one that has done the opposite. And of course, they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. But we don't always want to be against stuff, right? It's kind of
Yes.
negative to always be like, this is bad. And people are like, well, how should it work? And so we've created this site, educationalindependence.net, declare your educational independence. And it's a positive vision for how education should be done, how it could and should be financed. And it's a way of saying, I'm going to reject the socialist, Marxist way of funding and embrace a free market form of funding our educational systems here in the United States. And so it's really about putting a positive view forward. And, our big focus has been getting not a volume of names, but a quality of names. And so you can see a strong
Well, I was going to
list of
say Alex
people.
Newman.
Yeah, which you've had on just yesterday or a couple days ago?
No, actually a couple of weeks ago, but yeah,
Couple weeks ago, I just saw it.
yeah, that man, holy cow. That man, holy cow.
Yeah, so let me tell you a story real quick, and I think this will kind of bring it home on the negative side of it. Arizona has a program that the Republicans or the conservative think tanks, I call them dumb tanks, say right now, even though I'm a donor to all of them, I just always try to browbeat some sense into them over this one issue, is that in Arizona, it's the model policy, right? So everyone should do what Arizona's doing. Okay. So they, our friend Rachel, who's a leader for us in Arizona, goes to her friend's house who's homeschooling and has taken this ESA money to help her homeschool. And she's just so excited about it. She's like, and she's just trying to convince Rachel that it's a good thing because, there's not many of us that are saying it's a bad thing and people don't understand really what we're saying. And she goes, Rachel, before this ESA money, I had to work part-time in order to help homeschool our kids and make sure that we, had the things that we needed to be able to do that. And so when I was working part-time, I'd have to call my aunt in to come watch my children so I could go to my job. And now I don't have to do any of that because I've got all this ESA money that I can use to pay for all my children's things and the stuff that they need to be homeschooled. And Rachel, of course, she's trained well in the tools of rhetoric and logic and very kindly says, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You used to have to rely on hard work and your family, and now you rely on the government. And her friend's eyes got wide, and she realized what she had done. We are teaching our young people that if the government should fund education, we call it universal basic education income. They're going to vote for universal basic income. They're going to vote for universal housing income. They're going to vote for universal health care. So the Conservative Party or the Republicans have embraced a Marxist funding of education. it'll inevitably lead to embracing complete Marxism, because imagine ESAs in Arizona and you become a 23-year-old, you read all the good books and all these things, and you're against universal basic income, and the other side goes, well, you've already benefited from universal basic income. You had universal basic education income, and that gave you a great education. Why would you speak out against universal basic income for everyone else? And if you don't want to be a hypocrite, the logical thing is, yes, we've got to embrace these other ideas, because, I mean, you look at these ideas that they throw out there. One of the guys that's paid to promote it, doesn't have any kids, just got married, and they like to say, well, it's your money. I was like, well, if it's your money, then how do you not argue against any government funding, right? Government, it's all your money, so the government should fund all of it. And he said, well, we do food stamps. This is just like a food stamp program. I was like, well, since when was food stamps a conservative? And at least food stamps, you get off of them once you get to a certain income level. Universal. Theoretically, right? But I mean, at least you could argue that you could maybe put together a system that's a hand up and not a handout. These are permanent handouts to people who are already paying for their education system. I mean, it's going to drive up prices through inflation. And we already see crazy inflation, but it's going to drive it up even more. It's going to drive down the quality as they inevitably put hooks in and, want to keep accountability. A lot of these are funded based on COVID funding that was helped drive us to $33 trillion in debt. We're about to go into a recession. So the states are going to have to either raise taxes to continue to fund these programs, or they're going to have to cut these programs. I was listening to a lady. I am all ears on this, because we could make a bunch more money at Classical Conversations than we do now if we promoted these ideas. So
wait, Robert, it's not about money. It's not just about money.
What? No, I've
sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure all that's going to be inflated away anyways. The Lord says, seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you. They say the love of money is the root of all evil. My king has cattle on 1,000 hills. He's promised to take care of us on a daily basis. I mean, we do pretty well, but I mean, we'd be close to $1 billion company overnight if we started promoting these things and saying, hey, Classical Conversations is free. I could spin up a division that would help you fill out the paperwork. We could add some new services and program, and suddenly our, foundations program is, instead of $700 a year, is $7,000 a year. But since the state's paying it and the parent's not, we could just create all these things to jump through those state hoops. And, I could go, buy a new jet every year, and, wouldn't have to be worried about going on podcasts like this. I could get invited to all the DC, all the DC cocktail parties, get pats on the back. So I always listen to open ears, like, please tell me that I am wrong, that I am taking a immoral position, that I am missing some biblical truth. But every time I hear school choice people speak, I just get reaffirmed that they're just embracing Marxism and socialism, and that ultimately this will basically be the end of our republic. And it makes me sad. But when you have two parties that are both on board with welfare for everyone.
You mean you have a uniparty?
Yeah, we have a uniparty that we're going to be in trouble. So I was at this event. It's a kind of a secret event that a bunch of, conservative thought leaders go to, and they're talking about school choice. And at the end of it, this guy raises his hand in the Q&A portion and says, I'm starting schools in these states that have school choice, but how do I, make them financially viable? Because these things, this funding could go away next year, and then I'd have to close my schools. And this conservative thought leader, whose husband is in Congress and part of the Freedom Caucus, goes, well, what you need to do is just get so many people taking the money that it becomes politically impossible to end the funding for it by any party. And I was like, okay.
So
this is why we're
basically,
$33
Social
trillion
Security.
in debt. Yes, our conservative policies are now to get people addicted to free government money, so that the policies can never get away. And I was like, well, and then she kept using this term free market, and all I could think of is that scene from The Princess Bride where it goes, you keep using that term. I don't think it means what you think it means. And I didn't have a chance to ask any questions. But I try to, because I go to these type of think tanks, pretty regularly, and I'm one of the few people that's speaking out against them. I try to ask them good questions, but I couldn't think of any good question to ask the speaker. There's an Adam Sandler movie where he has to go back to school, and he has to ask a question, and he gets completely wrong, and the guy just like lambasts him, like, we are all now dumber for having heard you speak. All I could think of was like, I can't ask any questions because I just like playing that in my head over and over again. It's like, I gotta hope that the rest of these people in this room realize everything she said is the antithesis of what they claim to believe.
But see, I'm not really sure that they do get it, because we had the same argument. One of our thought leaders, we had his name's Brett Farley. He's with the Catholic, a Catholic group here in Oklahoma. And before we went on, I told you, or I asked you, I said, have you heard of the fact that our virtual charter board voted to bring on the first Catholic charter, online charter. And of course that will be paid for with public money. And I think the problem that you and I both have, as salmon swimming upstream, is you say they'll say, but you want the Christian ethic, the Christian ethos, out there? Isn't that what you want? Don't we want to take back the culture? And you can't get them to understand you can't take back the culture through anti-ethics and funding anything with public dollars that is a private anything, and certainly a religious private anything, is absolutely unethical, really. I mean, certainly in the terms of our American Constitution, because why did we leave Europe in the first place? We left Europe in the first place because they wanted a state church. They wanted everybody to be Catholic. That was the way it was. And yet we wanted to, have the opportunity to practice our own religions. And then here we are now having the state funding a religion, essentially. And we're back to where we started from, and yet nobody's getting it.
Yeah. Just so you know, I can stay on about 10 minutes longer. That my other meeting got pushed back. So we can stay on a little bit longer.
Nice. So I was doing that. We'll pretend like we're the salmon swimming upstream.
Right. So back in the Old Testament, God gave us these things called the 10 Commandments. One of them is thou shalt not covet. The other is thou shalt not steal. So, and I don't want to bash the Catholics because, the Protestants are doing it too. Although the Catholic Church certainly has a longer history of crony capitalism and throughout their history. But, you can't build institutions by breaking biblical commandments. And if you don't like the Old Testament, you can look at the New Testament. Jesus was asked by the Jewish leaders about this Roman law that would require Jews to walk a mile carrying Roman goods. And part of the thing is the Jews didn't really pay a lot of taxes to Rome. They had a lot of freedom in Rome compared to some of the other ethnic groups. And so this was one of the ways that Rome really projected the identity on Jews of you belong to us. We can make you stop what you're doing. We can basically make you pay a tax in the form of your time and walk a mile carrying our stuff. And of course, you'd have to walk back a mile, right, to get back to where you were because you're now a mile away. So you can imagine, 30 minutes to an hour of your time, depending on how heavy the load is. Well, what did Jesus say to these people? Walk a second mile.
True.
So when
Yeah.
Christians pay for our own education, even though they're taxing us for it, we are walking a second mile. When we advocate that our neighbors carry our burdens for a mile, now we're acting like Romans. So I want to align my life.
I haven't thought about it like that.
I want to align my life to act like Christians in Christ, not like the Romans. You also hear the parable of Jesus about the builder who built on sand and the builder who built on the rock. We know as Christians, as conservatives, that when you build institutions on government funding, you're building it on the sand. Right? Just look at the COVID mandates. They had the healthcare mandate and they had the private 100-worker mandate. The Supreme Court, struck down the 100-worker mandate for businesses because they're private institutions. They upheld the healthcare worker mandate because of Medicaid and Medicare, that the government was paying for the services, therefore the government could dictate what you're doing. Think about our hospitals. Hospitals, you still see Baptist hospital, Catholic hospital, but those are in name only now because the insurance agency, the government, has taken care of the healthcare industry. Before, when it was run by the churches and paid for privately, healthcare wasn't very expensive. You could get it with a smile. You could get it even in your own home. And
you could trade a pig for it.
You could trade a pig for it. Now we got our system. If you think about higher education with Pell Grants and all the subsidization that state and federal governments do there, we got $2 trillion in debt. Our college kids that can't read or write either. And, it's more and more expensive and the quality has gone down. Why would we repeat that system in our K through 12 and think we would get better results? Because we're smarter now? There's certainly no statistics that you can find in the public that would suggest that today's society is smarter than the ones from 200 years ago. I love those memes where it says, the old engine repair shops would tell you how to, tune your engine. The new engine, manuals say don't drink the engine oil. So, when you build society based on goods that are stolen from your neighbor.
Sorry, that was actually hilarious. I hadn't even thought of, but that is exactly 100% right, Robert. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be laughing about that all day. And it's not funny. I mean, geez.
So
and
that's
you sound like you're homeschooled, by the way.
I got a homeschool degree, so.
Oh, hey, before you get off of here, I do want to back up to something you said earlier, because this is super interesting to me with an 18-year-old. You guys are now starting college classes?
Yeah, so we have a couple things. We have what we call CC Plus. So you can take certain classes in our sophomore, junior, and senior level, which is challenge 2, 3, and 4. You can opt in to turn those papers into a professor, and they'll grade it for you, and you have to do some online components, but you're still doing the community aspect of it with a little bit of extra work to get dual, what we call concurrent credit, but we might refer to it as dual credit for college.
Yeah.
And then we've also got a partnership where our parents can do that same thing. If they have their 4-year degree, they can go get their master's degree. And then we've not really related to classical conversations curriculum specifically, but we do have mechanisms in place for parents to finish off their associates or get their degree right now. And we are in discussion to create a college for classical conversations. So we're trying to figure out how to move that forward in the near future.
Honestly, that was, and this kind of dovetails in with what we were just talking about. And Michael and I actually talked about this on Wednesday when he was talking about finances. If we're really, I mean, if we're going to exist as a remnant, and I do believe in that, it says it too many times in the Bible, if we're going to exist in that space, then what we're going to have to do is create our own parallel universe with the worlds, but a Christian universe that's paralleling that. And that means getting out of, not only just getting out of public schools, but getting out of public higher education as well, not just public K-12, but getting out of higher education too. And as a mother who has had several kids go on to higher education after being homeschooled, it's dreadful. I mean, you're paying for something I could do 5 times better myself in some instances. I mean, obviously I can't do the computer programming for the kid, but but you know what I mean. And it's just, so I am so supportive of that. Because we do, in order to keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have a parallel higher education as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. We have to
good on
be
you.
prepared for whatever the next thing is. But we can see, I mean, we're seeing Rome fall apart in front of our eyes, and we've got both major parties in the U.S. Gassed down, foot off the brake. And so I think it's important to try to figure out what worked and didn't work throughout the rise and fall of societies, and make sure that Christians aren't just protecting ourselves, but have an ability to, as the Lord commands us to do, help those around us. And so, when we have fiat dollars that are being devalued and printed at the rate that we're doing, that's why I have my own podcast, Refining Rhetoric, but every other week we do a 5-minute segment on crypto, because we don't know that that's an answer, but we do know that Christians should be on the forefront of finance, and it's an opportunity to get out of this corrupt system. The Old Testament and even Jesus himself talked about unequal weights and how that just corrupts society, and our entire society's wealth is built on unequal weights. And of course, we live in the United States, and you've got to go spend fiat dollars if you want to fill up your tank with gas or buy food right now. But I think it's really incumbent on us to go figure out what is a moral money and try to move that way as Christians.
It's so funny. If you go back and watch our Wednesday podcast, you're going to die laughing, because you encapsulated our Wednesday podcast. And Michael now is going to want to be your best friend.
Well, most people don't even know what fiat even means when it comes to money. But
yeah, so you could hear, petrodollar. Our money used to be based on gold, and then so if you went to a bank, you could literally give them $1, they'd give you $1 worth of gold. All right, then we have fiat, which means by declaration. So the government has declared this is $1, and that you will not get any gold out of the bank anymore for that dollar. And of course, once that happened, we saw income inequality rise significantly. We saw obviously the ability to steal your previous life's work by the inflation of our dollars, and the redistribution of wealth through the Federal Reserve. Then we have a thing called the petrodollar, where the United States dollar is really propped up because every single country in the world until recently, if you wanted to buy oil, You had to do it through the dollar. And of course, now we've got this green energy movement, which of course will make that impossible. You've got organizations like Russia, India, China, and Brazil have formed a thing called BRICS to start trading oil and other things. So foreign countries aren't going to want our currency as much. So we'll see that as the destruction of our currency. And then we've got the war machine, which is ultimately violence, is now propping up our lifestyles. So
Well, violence makes money.
exciting times.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
Well, Robert, it has been such a joy and a pleasure to have you on. I mean, honestly, I wish we could just do this on a regular basis, because I just so enjoy talking to you, and you just have you have so much respect from me, because I've been through the program with my kids, and I watch what you do, and I mean, you go. I mean, hang in there. I'll keep recommending classical
thank you.
because it's just the best. And, we'll continue to stay in touch. And if something great happens that you need out, you are always welcome on this podcast to come chat with us and let us know. So, we'll continue to keep in touch. And again, thanks so much for being with us, Robert.
Yeah, Jenny, thanks for having me. Michael, nice to meet you. Definitely
Yes,
would
sir.
love to come back. And, if you ever need a guest, I've got a wide variety of things I can talk about and just enjoy sharing.
He's
I would
highly
not know
educated,
that.
Jenny. He's highly educated.
So go to classicalconversations.com, and your children can be way smarter than me and will know a whole lot more, because I only had 3 years of classical, and I'm redeeming my own classical education through my young 3 children who are in our foundations program. And it's such a joy to be a second generation homeschooler. So if my family can do it, you can do it. classicalconversations.com.
Thank you, Robert. God bless you, and you have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
All righty. Bye. I accidentally pushed the button too fast there and got him off. But I hope you guys loved that. He just, I mean, to me, he's been somebody that I've looked up to, since I met him. He's just, I mean, as you could tell, he's kind of like the every guy, he just knows so much, and he's such a pleasant person. And anyway, I just, I kind of fangirl Robert Bortins.
Well, he's a product of his own system, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to see. You want to see something that you've put into place, you've executed, gone through the entire process, and you see the fruit of what it's produced on the other side, which he's just an absolutely well-rounded, unwavering, Christian, conservative. He can think on multiple levels. He's very articulate. I mean, that's what it is to be an American.
Well, and the other thing I love too about him, when I first found Jesus, one of the things that I would say was Jesus is joy, because there's so much happiness that I mean, just from knowing Jesus, it can really make you happy. And he's just always been that Jesus is joy kind of guy. To me, he's just such a pleasant, happy person, and it's just, it's been a blessing getting to know him over the years, and yeah. I'm gonna quit fangirling now.
Well,
let's talk about something.
No, I think a couple things to really take away is, if we just if we're in this time period where we need to be taking responsibility, more and more responsibility. We're trying to have accountability. We're trying to have transparency. These things are coming to the forefront finally, kind of more so than ever, I think, in public education. And he kind of hit the nail on the head when he said, if you don't put that much work into educating your kids, then you're not really going to have, what are you going to get out of it? Because the good things, the things that you really want and need and that are important, you have to work for those. And he gave that little parable with Jesus also, walk the extra mile. And I think too many parents in today's time have I mean, I know I'll always defend parents because I am a current parent with 5 kids in today's time where we have, it's hard to survive. You have to work. You have to
Yeah.
go do these things. You have a lot of responsibility. There's so many
Yeah.
other things that take your time that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. But at the same time, we can't just hand our kids off to a system in public education because that system is massively corrupt. The moral compass is completely gone. We're moving into a place to where all these kids are corrupted. They don't have critical thinking skills. They can't contribute in any way. They can't even make change at a cash register. They sure
Yeah.
can't talk in a normal conversation or contribute really socially outside of their phone. So what is
Yeah.
the purpose? And ultimately it's control. I mean, it comes down to big government is big control, and a dumbed down population is easy to control.
Absolutely. But let me say too, because we just brought this up quickly, it's not just, I mean, parents, it's not just school. I mean, so much of it is this.
Yeah.
Until you decide to take over this thing, and you decide that you're not going to let them on Snapchat, and you decide you're not going to let them on TikTok, and you decide, I mean, because you, even if they go to school, if they come home and you're engaged with them, but they're still doing this, you're done. I mean, this is, I really honestly do believe that this, especially for children, is the devil's own. This, he invented this thing because it's the worst. Oh, and I wanted to mention something to you because you will absolutely love this. So I subscribe to an Irish online newspaper, okay, because we're Irish, and I am anyway. So let me see if I can find it. Please let me. Okay, here it is. You're gonna love this one. Are you ready? So I read the here's the article. All right. Excess deaths monitored as an indicator of the impact of climate change.
Oh, yeah, climate change, excess deaths. Huh.
The Department of Health, this is in Ireland. The Department of Health says it is engaging with the OECD, which is an Irish, some kind of Irish, alphabet soup, bureaucratic thing, to monitor excess mortality as, quote, an indicator of the impact of climate change, and says that heart-related issues and tumors were some of the leading causes of death last year. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, yeah, we could go into that for a long time. But if I had a time machine, Jenny, there's a lot of things I'd do. But one thing that I would do if I had a time machine, I would go back to maybe, I mean, you wouldn't have to go back that far, probably just a little earlier than 2000. I would literally go and trademark the words climate change. That's what I would, that's one thing I would do. I would own those words.
If only. Well, because you didn't realize, I mean, don't forget, it was global warming. So, back in the
Yeah.
70s, if you'd have trademarked global warming, you would have been good.
Well, let's go back to the 80s, the late 80s. You remember what the big deal was back in the late 80s with all the climate, global warming, all the stuff? Do you remember? I was literally, okay, I lived in the Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, where there was no rain. But I was deathly afraid of the acid rain. You remember that?
No way, really?
Oh yeah. All they ever talked about in school, all this stuff was acid rain. This, if we're using hairspray bottles on our hair, we're contributing to acid rain. I mean, I was so afraid of acid rain. I was like, if it was raining, I was not even going outside.
See, that's just so sad that that this is how.
Well, yeah, but think about that same thing. Think about that same thing with just the massive indoctrination and just constant push of climate change, all this stuff. And I told you that story that that I don't know if I probably didn't say it on the podcast. Anyway, I was at a business where I was working before, and there was a gentleman that came in, and he was all trendy, and he was not to say anything's wrong with trendies, but he was real liberal, trendy, and he was talking about, you know, the ice caps and polar bears and all this stuff. And I just said, hey, you know, last time I checked, that ice had been melting for tens of thousands of years. It's been melting for tens of thousands of years, you know. And I said, I don't think, you know, our recent, you know, I don't think mankind was putting all this stuff, you know, CO2, all these driving all these cars, bringing all these boats over. That wasn't happening, you know, 20, 30, 40,000 years ago, you know. And he just didn't have any, he just literally walked out. I said, I think it's been melting for a long time.
Yeah. Well, you know, Alex Newman, we referenced him earlier in the podcast when we had him on several weeks ago. And he said the funniest thing, I still think it's hilarious, when he said, yeah, I followed the climate change clown car went around the world. It just still makes me giggle. But he was actually on Epic Times, because he writes for Epic Times. And he was actually on Epic Times just recently and did a video with one of the guys talking about the fact that there are now 3 legitimate papers that have hit, peer-reviewed papers that have hit academia. And they all basically show that climate change is just a complete ruse. And when the interviewer was talking to Alex Newman about that, he said, you know, how do you explain this? That these 3 papers are suddenly coming out, and they're by big, huge names. Like, I've forgotten what the name of the Japanese mathematician who's also been doing I can't think of his name. But he just wrote one of these papers, and he asked Alex, he was like, well, why is this suddenly just coming out? And he said, I can tell you why, because they've come out from underneath their contracts and they're not getting grants anymore. And so now, since they don't have to be quiet and meek and do whatever they're saying, you know, the powers that be who are giving them this money to do this research, they don't have to be quiet anymore. They can just say whatever they want, because they're out from under these grants now and out from under these grant contracts. So, you know, it's a sad, that particular conversation was such a sad commentary on what it's like in America today. People will basically dangle a dollar bill, which means nothing. We've just talked about that for 2 days in a row now. Dangle a dollar bill in their face and say, you know, here, you can have this, but you have to say this. And people do it. And then that's what we have right now. And you literally have kids. I mean, obviously Greta Thunberg is, you know, the top of the worst, but you still have kids that are out there screaming, kids, high school, early 20s, out there screaming with signs, you're killing the planet, you know, and they really truly believe this stuff. Now, that being said, as a Christian, do I have a responsibility to, you know, do the best I can to make sure our footprint is small? Yes, we do. I just think that's part of our, you know, individual job. If we love the world that God gave us, then we take care of it. But
we don't want to pollute anything.
No.
Well,
but
we live in that time, Jenny. I mean, and I'm a part of this because we have trained our kids to just take those bribes, you know, to get them to shut up. We give them a phone or an iPad, or a gaming system. You know, we're somewhere. We give them a treat if they're going to do something, instead of just like when I was a kid, if my dad said, you better have your room clean by the time I get home, or what. I mean, there was no bribing. There was no like, hey, I'll go get you a Brahms if you know, go mow the yard or something. You know,
the world stopped if you didn't.
Yeah, there was none of that. And we live in that time now where everything is a trade out kind of bribe. You know, no one's going to do anything unless they're getting something.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how to fix that problem. I think it does actually go back to the parallel everything. You know, we just need to eschew, we need to give away what's happening in this world, and we just need to set ourselves outside of that as much as we possibly can, because it's just us being corrupted along with it isn't going to help anything.
Yeah.
And it's like what I said. I mean, I think about you, and not just education, but for you, like with money, and me certainly with education. And Robert, we're salmon. I mean, we're just swimming upstream. And Robert said exactly the same things that we've said.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not as though people independent of one another aren't coming to the same conclusions,
Yeah.
but I believe that those conclusions aren't getting out into, they're not getting traction because of the fact that everybody just wants their government handout. They just want their
Yeah.
handout. Can I just have my handout and I'll go back and do whatever you say? I
Well,
just need my handout.
you know, what are we called? I mean, people overlook this all the time. And I point this out to my family, my kids, everyone constantly. We're called consumers. Okay. That's what we're
Yeah.
called. I mean, everything that is based in this economy, everything that we do is is based on consumption, is based on us just taking. I try to tell my kids, you need to have as much giving, as much production, as much outward as you have coming in, because you don't want to live, because someone has to be on the production side of the consumption. You know, we're literally 100% consumers. Everything we do is consume. And that's how we're judged. That's how our economy works. That's how our social hierarchy works, basically, is by the stuff we have. I mean, people call it materialism, or we live in a material. It's really consumption. We really, you know, the more we consume, it's like the higher status, you know, we have. And I'd love to just break that, have our own parallel to where, you know, we're contributors, we're producers, we're creating, you know, our things, not necessarily just buying them.
Well, I think the only way to do that is to do what we're doing, which is just saying it over and over and over again. Because, and I've said it on this podcast before, we've even though I have a master's degree and I could be out bringing in a pretty decent salary, you know, I've always stayed home because my husband asked me to stay home with the kids and not to work. So we've always not had vacations that other people have had. We've not had new cars. I don't remember. I think the last new car I ever got was before we had kids and I was actually working a job. That's the only new car that I've ever had. So we have secondhand cars. We have, you know, we don't go on these vacations. We don't have, I mean, and you talk to other people about that and they're like, you don't have a new car? You don't get new cars? And you're like, no. And not only that, just, this is what I can't understand about people. All right. So a new car will cost you $40,000 just driving it off the lot, right? Okay. So you drive the new car that you just, and most people don't have cash to plunk it down. So now you have a loan, and right. So you don't own it outright. You have a loan, and now you have interest on that loan. And now really it's the bank's car. You're just borrowing it from the bank, or you're leasing it from the bank, right? So if you were to turn around in a week and try to sell that car, are you going to get the 40,000 out of it that you put into it?
Nope.
So what happened? It lost value just driving off. You putting miles on it degraded its value, right? What kind of investment is that? I mean, a car isn't even really an investment because it loses value the longer you have. So none of this about new cars makes any sense to me. It just doesn't add up. So I'm telling you, I don't understand the ways of the world.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
For me, you know what? I mean, and we could talk about this forever, and we're already on an hour and a half, but for me, like, what I teach my kids is pretty simple. You pretty much do things in life because they either make you feel good or you don't want to suffer the consequence of something. I mean, that's pretty much the two things why you would make a decision. So I would rather have my kids understand and learn that it's not what they consume that makes them happy. It's what they
Yes.
do, it's what they create, it's what they contribute. I mean, I'm much more I mean, sure, I could go change my own oil or fix my timing chain, or something like my timing belt, but it's not that I don't want to pay someone else to do it. If I figure out how to do it myself, I'm so much more satisfied. I'm happy. I've done something to fix something or create something or make something, and that's what really matters to me. And I try to weigh that scale constantly with my own family and just say, why do you really want that Lego set? I mean, let's just go build something new out of the ones you already have, and let's see what you can actually do, with your own thought process and thinking and plan, draw something out. I mean, that's so much more beneficial.
Intellectually
Yeah.
stimulating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can just go get a set of Legos per se, follow the directions that tell you every single little piece, how to put them when and where, or you could get this big box of all these ones that are broken and just go make something totally new that's never even been here before.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I think about cooking like that. The sad thing about today is that so many women, and men can cook too. I don't want this to be a sexist thing, so get over it if you're, going that direction. But so many women today they either don't like to cook, or they have no idea how to cook. And maybe they don't like to cook because they have no idea how to cook. So we have the rise of these restaurants now. And so many people, you just ask them, how many nights a week do you eat at home? And they'll go, oh, maybe one or two, and they're out, 5 and 6 nights a week eating out, which is unbelievably expensive compared to eating in. And I have always cooked. I was brought up cooking. I mean, I lived with my aunt for a summer, and she taught me how to cook. And not that my mom didn't, she just was always working, bless her heart. And I just have always cooked, and it's so much more self-satisfying
Yeah.
to me to have cooked a meal, and then the boys go, oh, we really like that. That was great. And then I'm like, hey, that's awesome. And guess what? We didn't have to spend money, $15 or $30 on a plate of food at a restaurant. So
Well, and I think
I
like
don't.
what you said, it is satisfying. I mean,
Yeah.
I love to when one of my boys or my daughter says, "Dad, please make me some eggs," because you make the best eggs. I love the way that and it's good to know that they want that, they need that. They're asking
Yeah.
for you. They're not saying, "Hey, go get me a Brahms," or "Go
Yeah.
get me a McDonald's," or something like that. And as a parent, I want them to be able to, know that I can provide for them and that I can give
Right.
them what they want and need, that's going to fulfill and satisfy them, and that they're grateful and happy for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. There's nothing more satisfying than doing something yourself. And I think so many people today are missing that component. And it's
Yeah.
just, it's really sad. And it's not helping society, and it's not helping individuals.
Yeah.
So for
Well,
Pete's sakes, go learn how to do something yourself. We may end up having to end every podcast with the same thing. Go out and be as self-sufficient as you possibly can every day.
100%. I'm right there with you. 100%.
All right. Well, I have an interesting thing for you. I'm not sure if I told you this or not, so I'll mention it on the podcast. We notified everybody that we are going to be having Representative Sherry Conley, come on once a month, and she's going to have the second Friday of every month, and she's going to come on and talk to us about, whatever Sherry Conley would like to talk to us about. So we have her. Also, V1SUT, our V1SUT Substack blogger, who has done so much really great work. If you haven't seen the latest thing that she's done, you do need to go V1SUT Substack. go look. She's talking about how pedophiles are left in the public education system as teachers and teachers' aides, and they just keep getting perpetuated through the system. It's really something that you need to know. She's a really wonderful research journalist, and I'm very pleased to say that she is going to start being a regular for us. She will come on the second Wednesday of the month, and she's going to talk about whatever research she's doing at the time. So I'm so excited to have her be a regular on the podcast. And I'm working on one other regular for our podcast, and she has consented. We're just trying to work that out. She is Dr. Sandy Harrell, who I have known, oh gosh, I think since we started Rope. She's a teacher, has been a teacher for many, many years, got her doctorate degree. She teaches math. And just having a teacher on regularly, and a teacher of math who can talk about math education, who can talk about good versus bad math education. I was going to sound like meth education. We don't want that. We want math education, but she's going to come on and talk about that. So, I mean, we're really developing, I think, a podcast that people are going to want to really tune in for, because it won't just be you and me as talking heads, even though I think we have plenty interesting to say. We'll have lots of, I'm hoping to have even another couple of people come on and be able to talk about various things. So I hope that you stay tuned, and that you follow us and like us on Rumble, and like us on YouTube, because we would like to be monetized. And unfortunately, that's all tied to likes. So please like us and share us. Anything for you, Michael?
No, ultimately, and I think I'll probably sign off on all these podcasts with almost the same message. We as parents need to take responsibility, just ultimately, whether it's in education, our finances, our self-reliance, our own food supply, our preparations for the future, whatever it may be. We need to take our own responsibility, and not just wait for the government or someone else, or just, be that beacon of self-reliance and independence.
Self-reliance is liberty.
Yeah, it is.
It is. All right. Well, I just like to remind people of this. Don't forget, we do have a Patreon account. If you would like to sign up for our Patreon account, you can absolutely do so. It would certainly help us out. We do have expenses every month, certainly every year, because now, it's all, they like to move to yearly. So expenses. Yeah. So anyway, any big plans for the weekend, Michael?
Now, just working around my house, doing some of my own work. I always involve all my kids in my work, whether I'm working on my lawnmower, or painting the house, or doing some type of project, or building new flower beds or garden boxes or whatever. I get them out there.
Dang, you go, guy. I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow, so we'll have to see. And maybe getting the newsletter ready. All right. Well, Michael, it's been a joy talking with you today. Thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again next Wednesday. Have a great weekend.